Vigil, taking a daily look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel Vigil.
Football is finally here. It's officially week one of the NFL season. Broncos taking on the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday. James Palmer giving us all the details. One, we're going to be going over season predictions, Mr. Palmer, and then we'll dabble into what you're hearing, what's happening up there with the Seahawks a little bit. How are you, though? It's been a few weeks.
It has been a minute, right? We missed last week. I'm good. We were just chatting about, the fish takeover at Dick's Sporting Goods Park. I live right there. So if the wind is right, I got plenty of fish tunes coming towards the house. We can sit on the balcony if we choose to stay here, which we usually don't. We go to the mountains and avoid the entire situation. But
don't blame you.
That's kind of like the sign that summer's over when fish invades my neighborhood and that football's officially here. Yeah.
Are you ready? The craziness, right? We're down to the 53-man roster. We're seeing who's making the practice squad. Things start to get serious starting really yesterday, but we'll look to today because most people were off on yesterday.
Yeah, it's nuts. And then this week, obviously we have the Thursday night game, we have the Friday game, we have this, everything on Sunday. So the season kicks off with just a monster on Thursday with the Ravens and the Chiefs looking to, show everybody that they can have the ability to three-peat, like a marquee matchup from the defending Super Bowl champions right into a game in Brazil, right into week one, which has a ton of different matchups that we want to see and some rookie quarterbacks with the Broncos included. We are diving right into it, and it starts in 72 hours.
I'm so ready. I'm finally meaningful football. We can talk about it. Okay, I want to get real quick, just because you'd mentioned Brazil, your thoughts on this whole Brazil thing. It feels like there's a lot of things in the headline. Darius Slay coming out saying he's not excited to be going out there to Brazil to play for this game. I'm just curious your opinion on it.
Well, this is what the NFL does. They're continuing to try to spread the game globally. I've covered the international game probably on 6 or 7 different occasions. I've been to Wembley, Tottenham. I've been to Azteca and Mexico City, which is probably the one comparison you could probably make to this one as opposed to the ones that have happened in Germany and then in England. When I covered the Patriots and Raiders game in Azteca, neither team really left the hotel either. It was Willie McGinnis and I, former Patriot great, spending all of our time with our esteemed security team that took us from place to place around Mexico City. So I get kind of the feel of this, but this is also the NFL realizing how much it's growing outside of the United States. A perfect example is Netflix's documentary, The Quarterback Series by Peyton Manning, that exploded overseas for Netflix. And it showed them the interest that places in Asia had about the NFL. And this is what the league is continuing trying to do. Brazil has a massive NFL fan base. And so making sure that things are done safely and correctly, I believe, since I've covered the game so extensively so many different times, I believe those measures are being taken care of by the league, and I would expect them to do everything in their power that they have in the past for this game as well. But it's just another avenue to try to grow the game, and that's what they're going to continue to do, whether the players, I hate to say this, really like it or not about playing in the game. They're going to have to play in them.
Yeah, no kidding, right? We're seeing the travel and how players aren't big fans of it, but it is what it is. I mean, it's a great thing that the NFL is continuing to grow, obviously, but there are some of the downsides of that when a majority of everything is here in the States. All right, James Palmer, give me your Denver Broncos season record prediction. It's the question everybody wants to know. It's what everyone's talking about. Drop me the number you got.
I'm really torn on this, Rachel, because I see a 7-win team, possibly, but that's just not in Sean Payton's DNA. That just doesn't happen when Sean Payton's coaching a team. I'll go with what I've said. I'll say 7, but I would not be shocked if it's over. My buddy Peter Schrager on NFL Network this morning, good friend, said that he thinks they're going to make the postseason and be the 5th seed. I would say this, they're way more talented than people give them credit for nationally. I've had a lot of arguments over the phone with people that I talk to around the league in other cities. And I've been the joint practice stood out to me against the Packers. I know Green Bay was working on some things in that practice, but nevertheless, there is talent on this roster and it's not household talent. I think that puts them in every game. I think they'll be extremely competitive. That's why I have such a hard time picking the number, because I can see them being in a lot of these games. Now, if they're great in the red zone and they stop the run and Bo Nix isn't overwhelmed, Sean Payton's staff and his coaching ability, I think they have the ability to sneak some of these games out. And then all of a sudden 7 becomes 9, possibly 10. What? Like, that sounds crazy what you were thinking at the start of camp. But now that you've seen this team kind of come together and that they might be a little bit better than you think, I'm still sticking with 7, though, just because I also know I think all our expectations were pretty high during the preseason. And defenses don't show you anything during the preseason. And you're going against 2s with a lot of teams. Like, the season and the preseason are very different. I believe the year the Lions went 0-16,
Yep.
they won every preseason game. So I just know that it's 2 different types of things. But if you're there every day, I think there is optimism.
It's crazy. I've been watching, what other people are saying for their expectations, and I've seen so many people come out and say 10-7. And I'm like, did we forget about the entire month of November and how brutal that schedule is too? I feel like this week against the Seahawks is a bit of a coin flip. We'll get to that in just a moment. But I've sat there this entire time and I've said 6 or 7 wins. And I found myself going through the schedule, and all of a sudden I was like, I'm at 9. And I don't know if it's because I'm buying the Bo Nix Kool-Aid, because, right, he looked good. He looked fun. He had the movement in the preseason. Or if I'm just saying, you know what, there's going to be a lot of close games, and probably some they're going to come out on top, and others they're obviously going to come out on bottom compared to just being that dominant team, right? Like, how many times too do you have a team like the Chiefs, cough, cough, who have to play the Broncos, but the following week they play the Bills, and maybe, just maybe, the Broncos able to sneak a win in there. So I'm kind of with you where I'm just like, I don't know where I want to fall, but I'm kind of right around that 7 win as well. But I could totally see it being 5 wins, and I could also see it being 9. So I feel like that's a span that everyone's like, well, now I just don't know which way I'm supposed to go.
It's exactly right, though. And I think that's the point I think we're all trying to get at is I think these games are going to be close. I think the Broncos are going to be much more competitive as a whole throughout the course of the season than they were a year ago.
Yep.
And then you put the Sean Payton factor into it. And if they are even, just say a third better than they were in the red zone a season ago, which, ask Sean about the red zone offense and he'll go insane, like how bad it was last year. So think about it. Like, even if they convert half of what they were unable to convert a season ago, that's massive for this team. I just think we're going to find out week 1. Like, did the front 7 improve? Is Bo Nix, somewhat, for real? I mean, like, as a rookie can be right out of the gate. And did, the going with big physical receivers that, in my opinion, can they all separate? I don't know if they can. But they definitely have the size and the physicality to go out there and play. Can Greg Dulcich stay healthy? There's all these different things that if they do fall the right way, I can see 10 wins. I really can. But I just think the margin for victory in a lot of these games is going to be razor thin.
Oh, I'm totally with you. 12-5, people are saying, majority of people coming in.
I want to talk to them.
NVQ, you know what? We want to go to their house on Sunday because they're living on the hype train for sure. Wow. Other people saying 6 wins. I feel like it's a lot of things, but people are expecting improvement over Russell Wilson, which is just one of those other games, right, where I'm just going to be honest. I don't know how I feel about this Sunday. I feel like the Broncos could not start off on a hot streak, which I know people don't want to hear, but I do think that they get their first win against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm just curious, and other people are too. What else are you hearing about what's happening out there with Pittsburgh?
With Pittsburgh? Oh, yeah, we can jump right to week 2. I think it's going to be...
We're going to come back, I promise, to the Seahawks.
I think it's going to be Russell Wilson for week 2. I don't know how long he's going to be the starter there. I mean, I've talked to enough people around the league who really kind of thought 2 weeks ago, hey, Arthur Smith, you should start catering this offense to Justin Fields when you go face the Falcons, and throw in all those parts of your playbook that you have had for Marcus Mariota that you've used in the past, and all the running quarterback stuff that you have with RPOs. And I mean, I've talked to so many defensive players that have played Justin Fields. I've been at games and covered him. Like, this is an elite running quarterback, like an elite talent physically in running the football. Obviously, him and Russ have a lot of the same flaws in terms of throwing it, with the accuracy issues, with taking way too many sacks, holding onto the ball way too long, having difficulty seeing the middle of the field. Those are all similar. So I think the switch will happen at some point. I really do. But I do know this is always a very, very good defense. And Bo Nix is going to have to face that defense. I know everybody's just going, Russell Wilson, Sean Payton. Well, guess what? Sean Payton doesn't coach the defense. So he really won't have very much going against Russell Wilson, other than probably him and Vance Joseph talking about, I know these are Russ's flaws because these are the things that drove me insane. Make sure you force him into doing these things. Outside of that, I mean, it's Bo Nix versus that defense. We know how good the Steelers defense is each and every year. So that I'm going to that game. I travel to games every week. That I'm staying home for week 2, and I will be going to Steelers Broncos.
Who wouldn't want it, right? I thought that was going to be some Sunday night, Monday night game, maybe even Thursday night, but it is what it is. We get a 2:00 game. Where are you headed this week?
I'm going to stay home because we got a big show. My first show with Steve Smith and I is right after this first week. 89 with Steve Smith and James Palmer. I don't have a lot of representation in it. 89 was Steve's number. I never wore 89, but that's okay. That's fine. But Steve and I are trying to get this show off the ground, so I got to kind of like stick around for this first week and kind of just soak everything in here and do stuff for Underdog. So we're going to kind of stay in the basement down here with like a million TVs watching everything, and then we'll hit the road, I guess, week 3 now that I think about it, because I'm staying home for week 2 for sure.
Who wouldn't want to? All right, Broncos open up as 5.5 underdogs against the Seattle Seahawks. Does that feel right to you, James Palmer?
It does. Honestly, it does, because it's funny. There was all that debate in New England about who's going to start the season, Drake May or Jacoby Brissett, and then it comes out it's Jacoby Brissett, and I'm sitting here going, man, I would hate to have been Drake May and have my very first NFL game be against Lou Anarumo's mind and the Cincinnati Bengals defense. I mean, Lou is one of the best defensive minds in football. Well, guess what? Bo Nix is going against one of the other top defensive minds in football, and Mike McDonald, who's the new head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. The way he disguises things, the way he brings blitzes from corners like Devin Witherspoon is one of the better young corners in all of football, the way he disguises and makes one thing look very easy to his defense, but very complex to the quarterback, with a secondary as good as they have with, there's some question marks, but they've definitely, like, Rick Woolen has played a lot better in camp as he played in his sophomore season after a Pro Bowl year, his rookie year. Like, this is not going to be an easy task for Bo Nix, specifically if you've ever been to that stadium. And I've been on the sideline there so many times. It's one of the loudest places in the NFL. It is no easy task to go and play there. Now, I know Sean Payton came out and said, like, I'm assuming Bo's played in big games, and I covered the SEC. I know how loud it can be when he was at Auburn. I know, up there at Oregon, things were loud. But when things are that loud, like they are at, Lumen Field, and you're operating something that isn't secondhand, and it's your first start in the NFL, there's a lot of things going on in your head, a lot of things you're checking. Like, it just makes things just probably a tick more difficult. I think that is going to be a really difficult task for a rookie in their first game, going against one of the defensive minds that the rest of the league is honestly really trying to copy right now.
Well, and let's be real, Bo Nix has even said it, that the coaching staff, Sean Payton and them, were putting together, playbooks essentially that made the quarterbacks look really good and things that they were comfortable with in the preseason. What percentage of those type of plays do you think we're going to be seeing from Sean Payton this first week? And what percent are going to be the ones that were like, all right, Bo Nix, you've really got to come out here and prove that you can be the starting QB?
Yeah, I think it's, Rachel, a slow maturation process, right? I mean, I don't think you just flip a switch and give him all these things that you think would beat this Seahawks defense right out of the gate. And I believe Sean probably has a list a mile long. I'm like, I bet we could do this, 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 and this, this. He's not going to give all of those to Bo. He's going to play to his strengths for sure. And that, in terms of percentages, is probably much greater week 1 than what we're hoping it is week 10, week 12, week 13, when it's no longer all of Bo's strengths. It's most likely becoming more of a blend of how do we win this game, and Bo can do more. I remember talking to him a couple of weeks ago. He's like, I have this offense. Like, I know it. I don't have it down. Like, I don't have it down pat, but I know it. I know it, And so that was, to me, in that conversation, a pretty good example of, like, he knows where he stands and knows what he knows and knows what he doesn't know, which is important for a young quarterback. But I don't think they throw him, a million new things for this first game. I just think that's setting him up to fail. You just got to find the things that he knows well that can also play well against this defense.
It's also going to be interesting to see how much, that leash, how much is he going to give to Bo Nix instead of saying, okay, Javonte, you've been in the league for some years, obviously coming back from injury. You had a fine year last year returning. Now it's your time to really be a bulldozer and to go out there. What percentage do you think we see of the run plays compared to pass?
I think they got to run the ball. They really, really do, and that takes the crowd out of it a little bit. It slows the game down.
Yep.
It calms down a young quarterback in most instances. That it allows them to go out there and just kind of that first drive. You want to probably have a easy completion designed in the early portion of your play calls, and you run the ball, and hopefully you can continue to run the ball. We know that there's some question marks on this Seattle defense up front. That we'll try to see if they're answered in week 1, but you have multiple backs that you can deploy, and you can use Bo's legs as well. I think that's something that we saw, we talk about the preseason being completely different. I do think that's one thing that we did see during the preseason, Rachel, is that he's going to run the ball. He's going to use his legs. The RPO game is going to be a part of this. And if that keeps, a defense that likes to bring different guys from different spots and likes to confuse you, well, if you sit there and hold that RPO for a second, there's going to be a tell. And then hopefully Bo can read it as quickly as possible, and you can go make something of it. But I think his legs and all the backs, I think that's an extremely important part when you're going against a secondary that some people say, with all 3 corners that they have, including Brown, who plays in the nickel, like one of the better groups of 3 in the NFL, I'd run the ball too.
Yeah, fair. Let's switch up to things on the defensive side of things for the Broncos. Riley Moss. He's going to get a lot of action, I'm assuming, this week against the Seahawks. Is he ready for it?
Yeah, we'll find out. I mean, because that's the thing, it's funny. I think we talked about it before when we had, I hosted that alt cast for the Broncos with Aqib Talib and Chris Harris. And they were like, Talib was like, I get 3-4 targets a game. Bradley Roby in 2015 be getting he get like 1 million targets. He's over 100 targets. Like, poor guy. He's like, nobody's throwing to Chris either. Chris would get like 5 targets a game. Well, that might be the Broncos this year. Jaquan McMillan is a phenomenal slot corner. And I think that's one of my favorite matchups to watch in week 1 across the NFL. Him versus Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's I just got to, put out the OH for just another Ohio State receiver out there in the NFL. But he's developed, from what I'm told, a really, really good chemistry in year 2 with Geno Smith. And he is such a good slot corner working on the inside. I'm slot receiver working on the inside. That matchup's going to be phenomenal. And then obviously Surtain against DK Metcalf maybe that's one that follows. So maybe it helps Riley Moss. The Tyler Lockett's been banged up for a lot of camp, actually, dealing with a leg injury that's kept him out for some time of camp. And maybe that's, that's in Riley Moss's favor. But he better expect targets. Like, he better. And I think he's a patient corner for a young corner. I think that's a big thing. I think he's got really good size. I think that helps him out as well. But as good as the other 2, I think, he's going to have a short memory. I think that might be like a trait that we're all going to have to, like, I don't know about asking him about it, but like, hey man, like, how quickly do you forget things because you're going to get a lot of targets?
Yeah, and I think we've actually even heard from it. Cecil Lammey, I think, has talked to him about the fact that, you are going to be one of the target guys with obviously Pat Surtain not getting as many. So how are you when it comes to just moving on to the next play? Because it's a trait he's going to have to do. And he says that he's kind of used to it. He got, he enjoyed that process of just having to be like, okay, this play was fine, but this one was great. And we just look ahead to making the next great play. So I'm fascinated by everything on that side. How are you feeling overall about the 53-man roster?
I like it. I understand what Sean's doing. I thought the Tim Patrick move was kind of a shock. I think you and I talked about it, going like, I think he's on this team, because I thought just checking the box, if he can be one of the 6 best receivers on this team, he's on the roster. Because I think what he brings to a young team is extremely important, specifically from a leadership standpoint, from a vocal standpoint, from a guy who just has been through so much that players really see that and they know it, and they respect guys like that. I think there's a reason why a team that has the cultural identity of the Detroit Lions picked him up as quickly as they did. Like, he fits that team so well. Like, I could see Dan Campbell just being like, this is the type of player that I want in my building, who's been through injuries like this, who's fought and clawed for everything he's gotten. That helps the culture of your room. But also, we know Sean's building a completely different culture here that's more youth and forward thinking and kind of putting the old guard in the rearview mirror. So I understand it. What I do want to see from this group is where they've kind of changed things up front in the front 7 defensively. Kenneth Walker is a really good back. So let's see if they improve their run issues. I think that's the other thing outside of Bo Nix and outside of, these matchups in the secondary we're talking about. I want to see if they fix their run issues. And I think this is a good opportunity to see that against a pretty good back.
All right, that was obviously one of the biggest things last year. So hopefully that they've improved. Real quick, just because we were talking about Tim Patrick to the Lions, I did not get to see the news. I was on vacation last week. So when I saw it, Samaje Perine to the Chiefs, I'm like, I know everybody gets all angry because it's the Broncos nemesis and all that jazz. But like, what a good landing spot for a guy who's essentially just been kind of thrown around in the league. I know he shined when he was with Cincinnati, but now, I'm like, what a good spot for him.
That's why he got the job there. I
Yeah.
mean, I've talked to people in Kansas City. It was texting with some people, and they're like, he would torch us when we played him when he was with Cincinnati. He always made plays against us, and there's a pretty good chance right now with Clyde Edwards-Helaire going on the I don't know which list he was essentially placed
The NIF,
on.
I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, with he's dealing with some mental health issues, which hopefully he gets himself through. Samaje Perine is essentially the backup to Isaiah Pacheco right now, and the way that he feels things. I see some similarities, but differences in Jerick McKinnon to playing similar role. Pat just knowing where to go with the football, and Samaje knowing where to find space. It's going to be one of those. I hate to say it. I think it's going to be one of those moves that everybody's going to go,
Probably.
and it's going to bother everybody because the Broncos moved on for him. But it was a crowded backfield. It really was. And I think if you want to give Audric Estime some run and Jaleel McLaughlin to have the ability to make some explosive plays, and I think Javonte is honestly. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people nationally the way he runs the football. So I look at all what they're looking at and go, I understand it. I do. But also, if he goes out and makes some plays Thursday night, everybody's going to go, what were we doing there in Denver?
The two was like stars of training camp, it felt like last year. Marvin Mims, Jaleel McLaughlin. Now you got to be able to step up this year.
Big time.
Tell me who's going to step up more? Who's going to live to the occasion?
If it goes by camp, it's kind of a no-brainer. I hate to say it. It's Jaleel. If you look at the way camp went, one of them shined a lot, and one of them had a pretty frustrating training camp, I would say. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn by saying that at all. It was pretty evident if you had eyes and ears and you were on the field watching camp throughout August. I think Jaleel needs to as well. They need to find ways to get explosive plays in a variety of ways. And they're banking on some of this short passing game, runs, those type of things can be explosive. They certainly can. It doesn't mean you have to go downfield. It doesn't mean you have to be a speedster downfield to be explosive either as an offense. There's plenty of people that think Courtland Sutton's an explosive play receiver just because he's a big body guy that can get the 50-50 ball downfield. He's not a burner by any stretch. I didn't see a whole lot from Marvin Mims. Hopefully a jump happens this year because everybody's expecting it. He's in that group of players, I would say, Rachel, that need to take a big jump this year. There's probably 5 or 6 of them on this roster that need to take a massive jump. He was kind of in my group, but Jaleel seems like the one, if you're going to pick between the two, that's going to give you more explosive plays if you're looking at it right now and you were there every day of training camp, which I believe we both were.
Yes, indeed. Man, it kind of feels like a lifetime ago, but I'm also like, meaningful football's here. Last one for you, Mr. Palmer.
Okay.
Is it going to be a three-peat, or is somebody else going to come in and take the reins and win the Super Bowl this year?
I bet against them last year, and I said there's no way. And what did they do? I think the offense in Kansas City is going to be so much better than it was the last 2 years. They lack speed tremendously. I do think they'll miss L'Jarius Sneed quite a bit on the defensive side of the ball. They do feel like they're way better at the tackle position. I think the stretch in December is going to be a tell-all for the Kansas City Chiefs. I believe they play 3 games in 10 days, which is insane. And if they can stay healthy, I don't see how they, couldn't three-peat. But the AFC is just a gauntlet. And there's, if Joe Burrow's healthy, Cincinnati has gone in there before. I've covered the game and won at Arrowhead. Lamar Jackson and the Ravens were the best team in football last year. They were. Throughout the entire course of the season, they were the best team. They didn't win it, but they were the best team. Okay. And the Niners were probably the second best team. So the Chiefs weren't even the top 2, and they won the Super Bowl. So, just finding a way to beat Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes is tough. The Broncos did it this past year. They got that, monkey off their back. The AFC's tough. It's really tough. And maybe some teams beat up on each other and we see somebody come out of the NFC. That's always possible too.
True. If only the Broncos were in the NFC, it might be an easier path to get back to the playoffs. Mr. Palmer, appreciate you as always. Best of luck. Have a great show this upcoming weekend. We'll be back next Tuesday breaking down.
Link subscribe. Yeah, I'm supposed to say that because we're on the internet, right? Link subscribe to Underdog Fantasy for Steve Smith and I with 89. Yeah.
Always. Hopefully we're talking about a Broncos win here on Sunday. Start the season 1-0. We will be back, like I said, next Tuesday. And then I will be back tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. for an episode of Denver Sports Daily. And right back here at 12 o'clock for Coffee Break. Have a wonderful Tuesday, everybody. Bye.